Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Part 141 based on novel. So let's start. Still no news. Are your people dumb? Zhongli Wu said coldly to Lin Hai. Although Zhongli Wu wouldn't admit it, he still admired Juzi a lot. When the Star Luo Empire snatched the Mingdo mountain range back, Zhongli Wu felt that it was unbelievable. His own mother couldn't stop the Star Luo Empire. He was in great disbelief. After that, Yi Shishire mentioned that someone had used Di Tian's strength to keep her at bay. It was then Zhongli Wu finally understood. Although the Star Luo Empire had regained control of the Mingdo mountain range and caused trouble at the Sun Moon Empire's borders, the Heavenly Soul Empire had already lost 2/3 of their land. Even their capital had been taken. All these were the merit of Juzi. This was why Zhongli Wu would have been much more polite if Juzi were here. However, he believed that Lin Hai was only a puppet. All the surveillance soul tools are operating at their highest efficiency. Also, we've sent out more than 10 soul engineer teams to search the sky. Indeed, we haven't found anything. Lin Hai also knew that he couldn't afford to offend Zhongli Wu. He could only explain the situation once again. Zhongli Wu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Don't tell me they have many skilled individuals over there hiding in the sky. Impossible, the surveillance soul tools here have been in use all this while. There's even monitoring of the sky using ground-based telescopes. Unless they can all conceal themselves, how can they disappear in the sky? As it's night time, the ground-based telescopes are much less effective. However, even so, any major movements would still be discovered. Furthermore, Nangong Wan and Masquerade are both titled Doluor. Even if the enemies are strong, they should be able to handle them for some time. At least they should be able to send distress signals. I don't understand how they could go missing. Just as Zhongli Wu was puzzled, frantic footstep noises were heard. Repa. Lin Hai straightened his face. Tell me, what have you found? Yes, Marshal. The Heavenly Centipede Doluor and Masquerade Doluor are back. After hearing his words, Lin Hai heaved a sigh of relief. The two of them are finally back. Now, I wonder how this guy will continue to put me in a spot. Zhongli Wu also appeared much more composed, and said, tell them that I'm here. Ask them to come see me. Noted. The soldier relaying the message acknowledged his order and quickly rushed off. Not long afterward, the curtains to the commander's tent opened, and two people walked in. Nangong Wan was walking slightly in front. He quickly arrived in front of Zhongli Wu and bowed before saying, Sect Leader. The Masquerade Doluor followed closely behind him and did the same. Zhongli Wu asked, why have both of you disappeared for so long? What happened? Nangong Wan looked very grim. That fellow was very cunning. After we discovered him, we hid in the clouds and got closer to him. However, he discovered us before we got close to him. He's a spiritual type titled Doluor, but his abilities are ordinary. However, he was very quick, and his senses were also very acute. After discovering us, he immediately turned around and fled. He had someone to help him. When we chased him to the Heavenly Soul Empire's base, we were afraid of falling into their trap, so we stopped and turned back. Zhongli Wu didn't suspect Nangong Wan. It was normal. How easy was it to harm two titled Doluor? Zhongli Wu nodded and asked, what other discoveries have you made? Nangong Wan replied, yes, Sect Leader. We seemed to have seen some people from Shrek Academy. Whoever helped that titled Doluor seemed to have come from Shrek Academy. We saw one of their signals. Because of that, we didn't venture further, as we were afraid of falling into their trap. Shrek Academy? Zhongli Wu was slightly moved when he heard these words. All this while, the Holy Ghost Church had felt that their greatest enemy wasn't the body sect, but Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy had been around for thousands of years. Furthermore, they had students from all around the world. In the three empires of the original Doluor continent, many military figures hailed from Shrek Academy. Once Shrek Academy announced their wish to accept students, the response would be overwhelming. This was why the Sun Moon Empire had failed when they started the First War. Shrek Academy's intervention caused everything to become futile. It had been some time since this war had started. Although Shrek Academy hadn't openly joined in the war, the death god Doluor claimed that someone from Shrek Academy had intervened during the Mingdo mountain range incident. Now there were people from Shrek Academy here too? Nangong Wan and the Masquerade Doluor stood at one side and silently waited as Zhongli Wu pondered. Did you clearly see what martial souls those from Shrek Academy possessed? Zhongli Wu asked. Nangong Wan replied, I only saw one. It was from a transcendent Doluo. His martial soul was a golden phoenix. His abilities were very great. Even if I challenged him to a duel, I wouldn't be confident of beating him. Golden phoenix? Transcendent Doluo? Yang Shaozhe? A cold look surfaced on Zhongli Wu's face. Yang Shaozhe, the radiant phoenix Doluo. He's actually personally here. It seems like Shrek Academy is about to intervene. As he spoke until here, Zhongli Wu's expression turned grimmer and grimmer. Although Shrek Academy no longer had an ultimate Doluo, the Holy Ghost Church had never once let down their guard against them. Even though the Holy Ghost Church was at its peak now, and even had 2 ultimate Doluo, they didn't have the idea of directly attacking Shrek Academy. This was especially since Shrek Academy had forced the Great Star Do Forest to retreat not long ago, which further enhanced the Academy's reputation as the top academy on the continent. Although the Holy Ghost Church wasn't aware of what had truly happened, the Great Star Do Forest was still the #1 soul beast forest in the world. Out of the 10 great savage beasts, 5 were in the Great Star Do Forest. This even included Di Tian. Even so, none of them could take down Shrek City. This showed how strong Shrek City was. The Holy Ghost Church was going to deal with Shrek Academy sooner or later. However, they had no intention of using their abilities to deal with them directly. They wanted to borrow the Sun Moon Empire's strength. No matter how strong Shrek Academy was, it was still a Soul Master Academy. Their values would be deeply rooted. Although the Academy had been investing greatly in soul tools in recent years, Zhongli Wu still felt that it was insufficient. Could they possibly catch up so quickly? No matter how impenetrable Shrek City was, they wouldn't be able to survive if Zhongli Wu led Soul Engineer legions to attack them, and fired Class 9 stationary soul cannons at them. However, Zhongli Wu was a little depressed that Yi Shishure and Long Xiaoyao had said that they couldn't attack Shrek Academy directly no matter what. Without the support of the 2 of them, Zhongli Wu didn't dare to make any plans to attack Shrek Academy. Since they're here, we'll let them come at us. Marshal Lin Hai. Zhongli Wu turned to Lin Hai. Lin Hai immediately stood up, and respectfully said, Imperial Tutor, please give me your orders. Zhongli Wu said, get your men to be more cautious and step up surveillance. Once you discover something, inform me quickly. I want to see what Yang Shaozhe is up to. Yes. Lin Hai respectfully acknowledged his words. Zhongli Wu turned to Nangong Wan and said, Nangong, Masquerade, go and rest. Both of you have done well this time by bringing back important news. However, don't chase our enemies recklessly in the future. Shrek Academy is very sly. Once you fall into their trap, you'll be in big trouble. Both of you are important to the church. I hope nothing happens to you. Thank you for your concern. Nangong Wan and the Masquerade Doluo bowed at the same time. Zhongli Wu waved them off and said, all right, both of you are dismissed. Yes. Nangong Wan and the Masquerade Doluo turned around and left. Just as they reached the opening of the tent, Zhongli Wu suddenly called, wait a minute. Nangong Wan and the Masquerade Doluo both stopped. The Masquerade Doluo stiffened up, but it was only slightly. It wasn't obvious. Zhongli Wu said, Masquerade, you've already stagnated for some time. Stop thinking about playing with women. Work harder. Although your martial soul isn't very strong, it's very special. If you can become a transcendent Doluo in the future, it'll be very helpful to the church. Sect leader, you also know that it's difficult to cultivate my demonic maggot. It's not that I'm not working hard. It's just that my demonic maggot hasn't been able to gain anything from devouring the spirits of ordinary humans after I became a titled Doluo. I can only achieve something if I devour the spirit of a titled Doluo. Why don't you give me some resources when the war continues? The Masquerade Doluo laughed. Zhongli Wu furrowed his brow and said, enough with that. The church still has uses for the spirits of titled Doluo. Even if your demonic maggot devours their spirits, it's not just 1 or 2 that will help you improve. It's such a waste. Although we are evil soul masters, stop trying to use shortcuts to achieve your goal. Work hard on your cultivation. You can improve in that way too. Look at Nangong. He's already rank 93 now. When he reaches rank 94, the church will turn resources toward him and quickly help him become a transcendent Doluo. If you stay in your current state, you can only remain as one of the lousier elders we have. Yes, I'll work harder. The Masquerade Doluo said a little awkwardly. You can go. Zhongli Wu gestured again. The Masquerade Doluo felt as if he had been given a big let-off, and walked out with Nangong Wan. After exiting the commander's tent, Nangong Wan and the Masquerade Doluor looked at each other. The originally sinister look in the Masquerade Doluor's eyes became clearer, and he nodded gently. Nangong Wan led him toward the left. Their tents were not far in that direction. The real Masquerade Doluor had died at Elder Song's hands. Without a doubt, the Masquerade Doluor now was an imitation. Hua Yuhao was imitating him. When Zhongli Wu had called out to him earlier, Hua Yuhao had tensed up. He clearly knew that if he was exposed in such a core area of the base, he would find it extremely difficult to escape from the sect leader of the Holy Ghost Church even if he had the protection of Di Tian's reverse scale. Fortunately, he had found out some details on the Masquerade Doluor from Nangong Wan before he came here. This was why he managed to bluff his way through. Nangong Wan sent the Masquerade Doluor to his tent before speaking through his soul power. "When are you going to remove my restrictions?" Hua Yuhao said, "When we finish this mission, we'll remove the restrictions. Shrek Academy isn't the Holy Ghost Church. We'll keep our promises. As long as you cooperate with us, we won't hurt you. We'll even help you keep up the pretense. When you finish this mission, you'll be free and continue to be an elder of the Holy Ghost Church. Of course, whatever you want to do in the future, it'll be your business. However, if you continue to harm others, you'll land in our hands again." Nangong Wan laughed bitterly as he nodded. He pointed to Hua Yuhao's tent before turning and leaving. He didn't fully trust Hua Yuhao. However, not believing Hua Yuhao didn't mean that he didn't believe Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy's reputation on the continent was very notable. Earlier, Yang Xiaozhe and Elder Song had guaranteed that he would be given his freedom if he helped them to complete this mission. Right now, the restrictions in Nangong Wan's body were placed by Hua Yuhao using necromancy after Yang Xiaozhe sucked away his soul power. In fact, the restrictions weren't lethal, but they would be very painful if they were triggered. After all, Hua Yuhao's cultivation wasn't too far off from his. These restrictions would only last for 3 days too. Of course, Nangong Wan didn't know all this. He only knew that his spiritual sea would be in excruciating pain if he tried to trigger the restrictions. Hua Yuhao bent over and entered his tent. The evil soul masters were treated very well in this camp. This tent was very large. However, Hua Yuhao's expression immediately changed when stepped in. There was a strong fragrance in the Masquerade Doluor's tent. This fragrance carried the smell of aphrodisiac. Not only that, but there was also a sinister aura that accompanied it. "Sir, you're back." A soft-spoken voice was heard. 2 simply dressed young girls received him immediately. Their faces were slightly red, and their breathing carried the aura of aphrodisiacs. Evidently, they were influenced by those drugs. These 2 young girls were very pretty, but the look in their eyes was hollow. It was as if they had lost their souls. Hua Yuhao said, "Stay away from me. Put your clothes on. I don't need your services today." "What?" The 2 girls were stunned, but they didn't dare to say anything, and immediately dressed up before leaving when they felt the killing intent coming from Hua Yuhao. When they left, the tent immediately smelled more refreshing. Hua Yuhao pulled the curtains open to get rid of the smell. Although he only had a brief interaction with both girls earlier, he could still feel that the aphrodisiacs came from their bodies. This meant that their bodies had been modified. The way that the Holy Ghost Church harmed people could really make one bristle with anger. Hua Yuhao didn't use his spiritual detection to observe his surroundings. He was in a very important area of the base. Everyone from the Holy Ghost Church stayed within this core region. Defense was undoubtedly very tight in such a region. If there was a spiritual barrier or a powerful individual around, he would immediately be detected. This was why Hua Yuhao only looked out from his windows after pulling his curtains open and sensed his surroundings. When fresher air circulated into his tent, he immediately shut the windows. The decoration inside this tent was quite classy. There was a huge carpet made out of animal skin that was laid on the ground, and a huge bed in the center of the tent. At the front, there was a table, a sofa, and daily tools. After sending the 2 young girls out, Hua Yuhao wasn't afraid of the Holy Ghost Church suspecting anything. Earlier, Zhongli Wu had told him to stop being so obsessed with sex. He was only listening to orders. After closing the curtains, the entire tent became much quieter. It was also much dimmer. There were only a few dim soul lamps that were still on. Evil soul masters didn't enjoy bright environments. Such dimness gave off a very sinister feel. Hua Yuhao didn't get onto the bed. To him, the Masquerade Doluor must have had been on it with many young girls. It was too dirty. He pulled out a chair and sat cross-legged on it. After this, He carefully unleashed his spiritual power. His spiritual detection was limited to his tent, but every single nook and cranny was within his detection. He wanted to make sure that this place was fine before he proceeded with the next step of his operation. A few minutes later, he opened his eyes once again and nodded. This is more like where an evil titled Doluor should stay. There aren't any surveillance precautions taken in this tent, and there are also no surveillance soul tools that cover it. This was great news. Hua Yuhao unleashed his soul power once again. This time, he formed a spiritual barrier and isolated the inside of the tent from the rest of the outside world. At this moment, he would immediately discover it if someone tried to use their spiritual power in this tent. It was just like when he was discovered. After completing this setup, Hua Yuhao started to mutter incantations. He was very soft. Unless one were in this room, it would be impossible to hear him. The masquerade Doluor was also partly adept at spiritual power. This was why it was easier for Hua Yuhao to keep up his false appearance if he imitated him. The evil soul master aura of the masquerade Doluor could be imitated, while his spiritual power wasn't weaker than the masquerade Doluor's was. As he started chanting, the space in front of him started to distort. Halos flashed, and a pitch-black door slowly opened in front of him. Hua Yuhao verified that no one had breached his spiritual barrier before he took a step into that door. He came into another dimension, his spectral demiplane. On a bald mountain, Elder Song, Yang Shaozhe, and everyone from the Tang sect was waiting for him. Apart from them, there was also the Ice Bear King. Everyone from the Tang sect had entered Hua Yuhao's spectral demiplane. They didn't have too much of a reaction when they first entered, but Yang Shaozhe and Elder Song were both astonished. They hadn't expected Hua Yuhao to be capable of this. It was because they were strong that they understood what a demiplane meant. Elder Song and Yang Shaozhe immediately realized where the spectral army came from when they were fighting the Great Star Do Forest when they saw the boundless sea of specters. However, neither of them asked any questions about it. In Hua Yuhao's plan, there was no way he could rescue Tang Yue alone. Tang Yue's current abilities were unknown. However, they knew she was at least an evil soul sage. Hua Yuhao couldn't harm her either. It was impossible to capture her quickly. Furthermore, any movement in this base would be immediately discovered. This was why Hua Yuhao had no choice but to expose his spectral demiplane to them, and let everyone rest inside it. When he entered it, it meant that everyone had assembled. Right now, the first step of the plan had been completed. How is it, Yuhao? Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Hua Yuhao. Hua Yuhao nodded lightly and recounted everything that had happened to them. Elder Song nodded and said, "All right, take care then. You don't have to worry about us. We'll be waiting for you. When you think the time is right, we'll begin the mission." Yes. Hua Yuhao had entered to say hi to everyone, and tell them that he had successfully snuck into the Sun Moon Empire's base. Yang Shaozhe furrowed his brow and said, "Yuhao, you should expedite your plan. The longer you stay there, the more you run the risk of being exposed." Yes. Hua Yuhao acknowledged once again. Elder Song laughed, "Shaozhe, I think you've yet to acclimate to the environment here. Wasn't that right?" Yang Shaozhe's martial soul was a radiant phoenix, and all his abilities were based on the element of light, while the demiplane was inhabited by undead creatures. Yang Shaozhe and Yi Gaiyi felt the most uncomfortable. If Yi Gaiyi hadn't already tried and realized that killing these undead creatures didn't improve her cultivation, she would probably have charged around to slaughter some undead. Yang Shaozhe directly admitted it, and said, "Yes, I truly don't like the feeling of this place. Yuhao, you have to tell me how you got this demiplane when we go back. I believe not even an ultimate Doluor can possibly possess a place like this." "Yes. One of my teachers left this place for me." Hua Yuhao needed to keep this secret very strictly before, but as he became stronger, he didn't need to keep it so excessively anymore. After all, he increasingly required this ability, just as he had told Elder Xian without hesitation back then about how he had a necromancer martial soul. Hua Yuhao retreated from within the black door, and began to chant as the spectral gate closed. Everything within the tent returned to normal. Hua Yuhao's plan wasn't complicated. He was to go undercover in the Sun Moon Empire's army camp, and his next step was to find some way to locate where Tang Yue was staying. Then, he would attempt to get closer to her, and figure out what was happening there. Afterwards, he would find a suitable opportunity to make a move and rescue her. Hua Yuhao had already planned how he was to escape. He would have no choice but to draw upon his abilities as a necromancer when that happened. They only had a chance to escape if he could create sufficient chaos. Hua Yuhao and the others had already conveyed their plans to the Heavenly Soul Empire before they departed. The Heavenly Soul Empire would feint an attack right before Hua Yuhao and the others would make their move, but a feint attack would be all. The attack was meant to attract their enemies' attention so that they could maneuver and complete their mission better. The Heavenly Soul Empire was very supportive of their plan, and that was especially so after finding out that Elder Song had defeated and killed an evil titled Doluo. Hua Yuhao had also promised that he would try his best to disrupt and destroy things within the Sun Moon Empire's camp. Hua Yuhao was the only successful product from the Ultimate Soldier plan, and he was best at concealing himself, assassinations, and carrying out missions. Creating some trouble inside the Sun Moon Empire's camp wouldn't be difficult at all. He began to contemplate his plan as he sat down with his legs crossed, and he tried all he could to make sure that his plan was complete. Hua Yuhao's strength would be very inadequate if he was by himself, but he had a very good helper now. The sky was becoming brighter outside, and the break of dawn meant a new day was about to begin. Hua Yuhao exited the tent and stared at the blue skies as he gazed far into the east while he quietly absorbed the thread of purple energy that rose there. It didn't take long before Nangong Wan walked briskly towards him. Their eyes met for a moment, and Nangong Wan smiled as he walked over and said, "Up so early, Masquerade? Come, let's go grab something to eat." Nangong Wan didn't rest either the previous night. He was even more worried than Hua Yuhao himself that his identity would be revealed, because he would be in deep trouble if Hua Yuhao's identity was discovered. When that happened, life and death wasn't the problem, because he would rather die than be alive. Nangong Wan was too aware of the Holy Ghost Church's methods. All right. Hua Yuhao didn't waste words. They proceeded towards the canteen under Nangong Wan's guidance. Nangong Wan projected his voice with his mind as they walked, and he introduced the places where they walked by. Nangong Wan was very useful as a spy, because Hua Yuhao couldn't use spiritual detection to investigate the camp directly. This was especially so because they were inside the army camp's core section, and there were many powerful evil soul masters wherever they went. They were going towards where the Soul Engineer legions were camped, and it was imperative for Hua Yuhao to know where they ate, where they showered, where they typically exercised or moved around in the day, and which areas were forbidden or the most dangerous. He could only make sure that his plan was complete with sufficient intelligence. The Holy Lady typically has her breakfast very early in the day, and it should be about now. We should go see her. Nangong Wan passed a message to Hua Yuhao. Hua Yuhao answered with his mind without altering his expression. Avoid interacting with other people to keep from exposing us. Nangong Wan replied, that won't be much of a problem. Us evil soul masters have our own personalities, and I'm better with people, so I'm more acquainted and friendly with many evil soul masters. But you don't interact much with them, so even if you don't say a word, they won't say anything to you even if you run into them. All right. They arrived in front of an enormous tent as they spoke. Typical soldiers and even officers got their meals from the army cooks before they went back to have them in their own mess. Only high-level army officials had their own canteen spots, while evil soul masters naturally had better treatment. The Soul Engineer legions and high-level army officials were also unwilling to eat with evil soul masters, so even though their canteen wasn't big, it was almost exclusively for evil soul masters to eat. There were some evil soul masters who were here to eat even though it was still early. They bowed respectfully when they saw Hua Yuhao and Nangong Wan. Status differences were very clear within an organization like the Holy Ghost Church, and strength was status. If those who were weaker dared to offend those who were stronger, nobody would speak out for the perpetrator even if he was killed. There were more than 10 tables in the dining tent, and each table could seat about 6 people. Hua Yuhao's body quivered once he entered the tent, and his eyes were almost guided by his consciousness as he immediately saw Tang Ya, who was eating at the innermost table. Tang Ya was wearing a long black dress, with bright blue flowery patterns on the edges. This clearly showed that her status was different from the others, since most individuals in the Holy Ghost Church only had a pure black cloak. Elders like Nangong Wan and the Masquerade Doluo had silver patterns at the edges of their robes, and Nangong Wan had told Hua Yuhao that people from the worship halls had golden patterns. The supreme leader that Hua Yuhao had seen before had golden patterns all over his robe, and it appeared most luxurious and pretty. Hua Yuhao and Nangong Wan exchanged a look, and Nangong Wan took him all the way inside until they were in front of Tang Ya's table as Nangong Wan said respectfully, "Holy Lady." Tang Ya looked up at them as she nodded with a plain look in her eyes. She didn't say anything, however. Hua Yuhao's emotions rippled faintly when he saw her eyes. Tang Ya's eyes were extremely cold, as if there weren't any emotions in them at all, and her pupils were completely gray. Hua Yuhao didn't detect any kind of life from her body. Hua Yuhao had interrogated the delicate Silk Immortal about Tang Ya's situation before. Yu had told him that Tang Ya was under an evil spell, and she was badly poisoned. Her delicate Silk Immortal pill could dispel the toxins in Tang Ya's body. At least, her pill could gradually remove and suppress those toxins. However, she still needed the Blue Silver Emperor to awaken her martial soul's life energy. Otherwise, her life energy would flow away together with those evil toxins, and she would ultimately die. The dishes in front of Tang Ya were very simple, but they looked very exquisite. There were evil soul masters at the other tables, but not a single one dared to sit at her table, as if this table was exclusively prepared for her. Nangong Wn and Hua Yuhao walked to another table and sat down as they got their breakfast. Breakfast was very sumptuous, and was prepared with ingredients that were very nutritious and beneficial for evil soul masters. Only evil soul masters had such special treatment. Hua Yuhao ate as he quietly felt the changes in Tang Ya's aura. Her life energy was undulating very weakly, as if her entire being no longer had any life energy. However, Hua Yuhao could feel an intense sense of alarm from her as she sat there, as if there was an enormous beast hidden within her body. Hua Yuhao could feel his heart tie up into knots as he ate his breakfast in silence. He could still remember when he first met teacher Xiao Ya, and how lively and cheerful she was. She was with his eldest senior brother back then, and they were like a couple made in heaven. She made the decision and allowed him to join the Tang sect, and then she used the Tang sect's only spot to let him enter Shrek Academy. It could be said that Tang Ya and Bei Bei had given him a new life, and Hua Yuhao had always kept this favor deep within his heart. Hua Yuhao's pain and agony as he witnessed Tang Ya's current situation wasn't difficult to imagine. He truly didn't know how Bei Bei would react if he saw her like this. Hua Yuhao made a silent vow to himself. Teacher Xiao Ya, we will definitely save you from this place no matter what. We have to help you return to normal. Just as Hua Yuhao's emotions were riling up, a voice suddenly rang out. Second brother, Old Seven, you guys are early today. Old Seven naturally referred to the masquerade Doluor, while second brother referred to Nangong Wan. Hua Yuhao immediately withdrew his emotions as he raised his head. However, his emotions quivered vigorously for a moment when he saw who had come. The person who was speaking to them was the one who was adept with soul tools in the Holy Ghost Church, the third elder that Hua Yuhao harbored a deep hatred for. Back then, those three elders had forced him to burn his spiritual sea before Wang Chua sacrificed herself to save him. It could be said that Chua died at the hands of the third elder and the fourth elder. Hua Yuhao didn't expect to run into this person so quickly. However, he had long known that he was here because of what Nangong Wn had described to him, so he did have some mental preparation. He quickly returned to normal after his emotions rippled a little. Nangong Wn said appropriately, "We're not early. It's just that we didn't sleep much last night. Someone from the Heavenly Soul Empire came over and was conducting surveillance high up in the sky. We went up to take a look, and chased them all the way back to the Heavenly Soul Empire's side. I think we're in a bit of trouble, Old Three. We have discovered people from Shrek Academy, and we've heard from the Supreme Leader that the Dean of Shrek Academy's Martial Soul Department, the Radiant Phoenix Doluor, Yang Shaozhe, is here." Yang Shaozhe? The third elder immediately shifted his attention to Nangong Wn as he said confusedly, "Yang Shaozhe? Was he the dragon god Doluor, Mu Ien's disciple back then? He should be a transcendent Doluor by now." Nangong Wn nodded and said, "That isn't all. If I remember correctly, he is also the next heir of Shrek Academy's Sea Gods Pavilion." The third elder sat down beside Nangong Wn and grunted coldly as he said, "Let him come. After all, our battle with Shrek Academy is a matter of when, not if. We have more than 10,000 soldiers in our great army, and we also have the Sun Moon Empire's 5 great Soul Engineer Legions, while the Supreme Leader is holding down the fort in person. Even if all of Shrek Academy's elites were here, their effectiveness on a battlefield such as this one would be very limited." Nangong Wn chuckled and said, "That sounds about right. Hurry up and eat." The third elder looked up at Hua Yuhao, who was beside Nangong Wan, and asked, "Old Seven, I heard you've chased your 2 mistresses away?" Hua Yuhao's expression darkened as he replied, "Third brother, don't pick on my scabs. The Supreme Leader scolded me yesterday, so how can I not change? If you're interested, those 2 girls can belong to you. I'm just afraid that you can't take it." The third elder laughed and said, "Nonsense. You know I don't like such things." Hua Yuhao laughed coldly and said, "How can that be? Why do I remember that you imprisoned a lady back then?" It's not that you don't like such things, but that you are very focused in your love, ha ha ha. The third elder blushed as he said suspiciously, how did you know that? Hua Yuhao was naturally referring to the third elder imprisoning Nan Shueishui, which not even Nangong Wn knew about. Hua Yuhao said plainly, as long as you've done something, somebody will know. You're already so old, third brother, so why are you still embarrassed? Alright, I've had my fill. I'm going back, and you can continue chatting with second brother. I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm going back to cultivate so that the supreme leader can't say that I've been lazy. Hua Yuhao stood up after his speech and walked out. He didn't want to say any more, as he was bound to say something wrong if he did. It was better to minimize any interaction with these evil soul masters. The third elder said unhappily to Nangong Wn, second brother, why does old Seven seem so weird today? Nangong Wn laughed and replied, that's probably because he isn't in such a good mood after the supreme leader chided him last night. But you know what's up with old Seven, it's very difficult for him to improve with that martial soul of his. Hua Yuhao saw that Tang Yue had also stood up to walk out before he left the canteen, and an idea occurred to him as he slowed his steps. Tang Yue maintained a steady pace as she walked towards her tent after leaving the canteen. The evil soul masters didn't reside very far from the canteen. Hua Yuhao naturally shared a path with her, and he pretended to run into her as he slowed and said respectfully, Holy Lady. Yes, Tang Yue acknowledged as she walked across his path, expressionless. She didn't pay any attention to him at all. Hua Yuhao made a quick judgment in his mind. From Tang Yue's current situation, her mind had to be affected by some kind of restriction or spell, and her martial soul had been infected by evil toxins. However, those evil toxins were catalyzing her growth and improvement, and from the aura that she was giving off, she should be an 8-ringed soul Doluor. Evil soul masters cultivate really quickly. Back then, teacher Xiao Yue was still quite some distance away from eldest senior brother's cultivation, but she has surpassed him now. Hua Yuhao watched Tang Yue disappear into her tent before he returned to his own. Today's result is good. At least, I've seen Tang Yue, and that proves Nangong Wan's intel is accurate. Now, I have to figure out how to take her away. Hua Yuhao crossed his legs and began to meditate as he returned to his room, but his brain began to spin rapidly. How can I take teacher Xiao Yue away safely? Furthermore, I have to ensure that we don't sustain any injuries or losses. The Sun Moon Empire's camp was rather peaceful because there were no battles, and only the occasional sounds of training soldiers could be heard from time to time. This area where the evil soul masters resided was separated from the rest, and there were no soldiers patrolling this area, so there wasn't much noise. A day quickly passed. Hua Yuhao didn't wait for Nangong Wn to arrive at midday as he went ahead to the canteen to eat. He deliberately went ahead early to avoid the powerful evil soul masters before he returned to his tent to continue cultivating. From the other evil soul master's perspective, the seventh elder began to put in effort after the supreme leader had scolded him, so nobody suspected him. Darkness befell the heavens as the sky became completely dark before Hua Yuhao opened his eyes in his tent. The tent was very dim, but Hua Yuhao's eyes were bright like the stars in the night sky. It's time to test the waters. A thread of white light emerged from Hua Yuhao's eyes, and his entire body seemed to quiver as the light around him contorted a little. A figure appeared soundlessly in front of him. This figure seemed small and cute, and it was about as large as an infant, but it looked identical to Hua Yuhao. The light became increasingly material, like it was a real tiny person. This was Hua Yuhao's spiritual avatar, that he had conjured with his concrete material spiritual power. Hua Yuhao had created a spiritual soul core, so his spiritual avatar was much stronger than before. His spiritual avatar could use some of Hua Yuhao's soul skills, and people couldn't even tell that his avatar was made from energy just by looking with their eyes. The mini Hua Yuhao glanced at his original body before he vanished into the air with a flash. Yes, that was imitation. Hua Yuhao's spiritual avatar could only use his spirit eyes soul skills. However, using a soul skill would consume part of his spiritual avatar's origin energy, and once his avatar's origin energy was depleted, it would crumble. Hua Yuhao's spiritual avatar left the tent under the cover of imitation, and soundlessly approached Tang Yue's tent. Hua Yuhao didn't go inside once he arrived outside Tang Yue's tent. Who knew whether Tang Yue had a spiritual barrier around her? Hua Yuhao would reveal his original body if he was discovered, and everything that he had discovered before would go to waste. Hua Yuhao circled around Tang Yue's tent before he circled another time around a large golden tent not far from there before he snuck further away. He wouldn't go into a tent to investigate things right now, because he could be easily ambushed or trapped if he did so. He had to be sure about the army camp situation as a whole before anything else. Furthermore, there was a more important place he had to find. Hua Yuhao could only use his spiritual avatar to walk briskly around the army camp because he couldn't use spiritual detection, though he could walk around very freely and casually because of imitation. The Sun Moon Empire's army camp undoubtedly had all kinds of surveillance soul tools, but these surveillance soul tools were directed outwards, not inwards. Who would be so bored as to investigate their own soldiers' situation? The reason why Hua Yuhao made his spiritual avatar so small was both to conserve spiritual power and also because a small body was harder for the surveillance soul tools to detect. Hua Yuhao moved very quickly, and he went almost one full round around the army camp before he quietly returned to his own tent. His spiritual avatar returned to his original body, and everything returned to normal. Hua Yuhao's eyes opened again, and the masquerade Doluor's expression became extremely solemn. Hua Yuhao could see a lot more clearly after investigating at such close proximity. The Sun Moon Empire's layout was seamless, and almost entirely impenetrable. There were many soldiers guarding their 5 soul tool fronts. There were no surveillance soul tools pointed inwards in the army camp's other places, but there were some around the 5 soul tool fronts. Everybody who came near had to be interrogated. Hua Yuhao didn't dare to let his spiritual avatar go close to those soul tool fronts. Furthermore, he could feel that there were linked formations which were continuously activated within those fronts. Even though he wasn't sure that they were doing, he had no doubt that they possessed formidable defensive or offensive capabilities. One misstep and he would be discovered, and become cannon fodder. Hua Yuhao had originally hoped to find one of the Sun Moon Empire's storage soul tools, or a warehouse that housed stationary soul cannon shells, which he could detonate at the appropriate time. He would create much chaos in the army camp if that happened, and cooperating with the Heavenly Soul Empire when the time came would be most effective. But it seemed like he had to change his plan, because he couldn't find any warehouses that stored soul tools. There was no question that these warehouses were contained within those soul tool fronts, which meant that he would have to break through the soul tool front's defenses if he wanted to bomb those warehouses. Not even Elder Song could do that even if she was here, not to mention Hua Yuhao. What should I do? Hua Yuhao's eyes squinted as he contemplated long and hard. This was very important for him, because insufficient chaos wouldn't give them sufficient time. The night was peaceful, and everything seemed to return to tranquility. The Sun Moon Empire increased their ground-based aerial surveillance, but they didn't discover anything. The Heavenly Soul Empire also seemed particularly calm and quiet. The Holy Ghost Church's evil soul masters discovered that, over the past 2 days, their 7th elder had become particularly hardworking. He didn't touch any girls, and he remained in his tent to cultivate effortfully. He was almost not seen at all in the day. Dinner, on the 2nd night. Hua Yuhao deliberately called Nangong Wn before eating dinner, and they walked towards the evil soul master's canteen together. 3rd elder, can you find an empty and remote place for me? It would be better if this place wasn't inside this core area, and best if it was near any of the 5 soul tool forts. That place must be quiet and uninhabited. Hua Yuhao passed a message to Nangong Wn with his mind. Nangong Wan was momentarily stunned. He forced a laugh and said, I'm afraid that's a little difficult. The areas closer to those soul tool fronts are heavily guarded, and well equipped with all sorts of surveillance soul tools. It's almost impossible to do something around them without being discovered. Are you guys ready to make your move? A worried expression appeared on his face as he spoke. Hua Yuhao said plainly, you don't have to worry, 3rd elder. We will give you a way out even when we execute our plan. You have to help me find such a place as fast as possible, and if it really isn't possible, a location slightly further away from those soul tool fronts is also acceptable, but it has to be further away from where we are. Only then can we move according to our plan. Nangong Wn knew that he no longer had a choice. He was most afraid of Hua Yuhao's identity being revealed, because Hua Yuhao had returned with him as the masquerade Doluor. Nangong Wan would also be exposed if Hua Yuhao was discovered. Alright, I'll try my best. Nangong Wn scurried away after dinner. He was much more familiar with the situation inside the army camp than Hua Yuhao was. Nangong Wn came to Hua Yuhao's tent to find him after 2 hours. There's a solution, Tang Wu. Nangong Wn still thought Hua Yuhao was Tang Wu up until now. Hua Yuhao frowned and replied, call me Masquerade. Nangong Wn froze for a moment. Alright, Masquerade, I think we have an opportunity, and it's quite a good one at that. The Holy Ghost Church has the authority to supervise and survey the army. The Supreme Leader has just passed the order for us to patrol several Soul Tool fronts tomorrow afternoon. The 2 fronts that belong to 2 of the hand that protects the nation's 2 Soul Engineer Legions are a little more troublesome because they don't show us much respect. The other 3 fronts that are responsible for defense that belong to normal Soul Engineer Legions are more polite toward us. Why don't we take a trip down together, so you can find an opportunity? Hua Yuhao was elated when he heard the news. That's fantastic, let's do it then. Tell the Supreme Leader that I will accompany you on patrol tomorrow. Alright, Nangong WN acknowledged, and he hesitated before he then continued, if you execute your plan tomorrow, what happens to me? Hua Yuhao answered, don't worry, I'll find an appropriate solution for you. When everything happens, I'll fake my death, and all you have to do is pretend you have no idea about anything. As for the restrictions on your body, we will help you remove them once we fully execute our plan. You're a smart man, and you should understand that something bad will happen to you if you foil our plan. Nangong WN hurriedly said, of course. Don't worry, as long as you keep your promise to remove my restrictions, I will help you as much as possible even if you look for me again next time. Nangong WN had taken Hua Yuhao, the masquerade Doluor, back together with him, and that meant he had a hold on Nangong WAN. Hua Yuhao wasn't at all worried that Nangong WAN would expose him in their operation. As for what would happen afterwards, Hua Yuhao didn't consider that too seriously. Who knew how things would unfold? How could Nangong WAN follow his instructions if there wasn't something to threaten him with? But rescuing Tang Ya was of the utmost importance for everyone from Shrek. Hua Yuhao immediately sealed his tent with a spiritual barrier once he escorted Nangong WN away before he swiftly summoned his spectral gate and began to discuss his plan with his companions. The most important component of his plan was executable with Nangong Wan's intel, and the next step was to iron out the rest of the plan perfectly. They would act tomorrow night. Hua Yuhao returned to his tent after discussing inside his spectral demiplane for 2 hours. His spiritual barrier was very normal, and it wasn't triggered at all, but Hua Yuhao didn't rest. Instead, he conjured another spiritual avatar as he sent it out of his tent, and he followed the path that he had scouted several days ago as he swiftly left the camp and disappeared into the distance. The Sun Moon Empire's surveillance soul tools that pointed outward covered every corner, but not every kind of soul tool could do that task. Hua Yuhao found a few loopholes after investigating for 2 days. His spiritual avatar wasn't afraid of thermal detectors, and he also had help from imitation. Hua Yuhao evaded the oscillation detectors and spiritual detectors before he slipped out of the camp and went straight for Heaven Do City. His spiritual avatar was carrying the signal soul tool that Princess Wei Na had given him. Hua Yuhao's spiritual avatar returned quietly after 2 hours, and it slipped back into the army camp with the same method as it swiftly returned to his tent and integrated back into his body. Preparations were mostly complete, and the next step had to be left until tomorrow. It was late into the night, and Hua Yuhao glanced in the direction of Tang Ya's tent before he closed his eyes and began to meditate. He had to maintain his peak spiritual condition for tomorrow's operation. Hua Yuhao got up very early in the morning and cultivated his purple demon eyes before he proceeded towards the canteen. He was walking when he suddenly sensed something, and subconsciously turned to look back, and he saw Tang Ya, who was calmly walking in the same direction. Hua Yuhao had seen Tang Ya a few times over the past 2 days, but Tang Ya almost never spoke with anyone. She was like a statue, or rather, she was like the walking dead. But Hua Yuhao could be sure that Tang Ya hadn't completely lost her consciousness. Otherwise, what use would this holy lady be for the Holy Ghost Church to use in the future? The Holy Ghost Church was probably hoping that she and Ma Xiaodao would carry the Holy Ghost Church forward. How would that be possible if they were just puppets? Holy lady, Hua Yuhao stopped and walked over to Tang Ya as he bowed. Hey, Tang Ya nodded, but she still responded as coldly as ever. Just as Hua Yuhao thought she would walk past him to eat, Tang Ya suddenly stopped and turned around to face him. She said coldly, "Seventh Elder, your aura seems to have changed. Are you having any problems with cultivation recently?" Hey! Hua Yuhao's heart skipped a beat. This was the first time that he had heard Tang Ya speak after coming into this place undercover. Tang Ya's voice wasn't very different from back then, but her voice no longer had any emotions, like she was just a machine talking. Holy lady, what kind of changes are you talking about? Hua Yuhao's mind was very stable. He wasn't caught off guard by the sudden change in circumstances, and he asked her a question instead with a smile on his face. Tang Ya seemed taken aback as she frowned and said, "I can't quite put a finger on it. I just find that your aura has become more intimate than before, like there's more familiarity." You're not as despicable as before. Tang Yue didn't attempt to mask her feelings when she said that she despised the masquerade Doluo. That surprised Hu Yuhao, because even though Tang Yue was the holy lady, she was just a soul Doluo. She wasn't polite at all to this elder. Blue silver. An elderly voice could be heard at this moment. Hu Yuhao felt his entire body tense up when he heard this voice, and he hurriedly took a few steps back as he spoke respectfully to where this voice was coming from. Greetings, Supreme Leader. Didn't that old voice belong to the Holy Ghost Church's Supreme Leader, Zhongli Wu? Tang Yue wasn't as reverent as Hu Yuhao was. Instead, she simply bowed faintly as a gesture in Zhongli Wu's direction. Zhongli Wu came beside Tang Yue and removed the hood on his head. This was the first time that Hu Yuhao got a look at the Holy Ghost Church's Supreme Leader at such close proximity. Zhongli Wu's hair was short and silver, and his hair was very thin and dense, and very sharp and tough, like steel needles. His eyebrows were thick, his eyes were bright, and he was actually extremely handsome. His eyes were dark purple, and faintly exuded a deep and profound aura. Nobody could feel his aura as an evil soul master just by looking at his physical appearance. He looked very young, and if not for his silver hair, he would have passed a middle-aged man. But Hu Yuhao knew that Zhongli Wu was only one generation younger than his teacher, Mu Yan, and the death god Doluo, Yi Shishui. He was probably more than 180 years old, yet he still looked very young. I didn't say much, Tang Yue responded coldly to Zhongli Wu's doubts, and Hu Yuhao heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Zhongli Wu smiled faintly and said, "Are you still hating on Seventh Elder? He didn't mean to scare you back then. I didn't expect you hold grudges. I've already instructed him not to unleash his demonic maggot in front of you, no matter what, so you don't have to worry. Come, let's eat." Zhongli Wu immediately grabbed Tang Yue's hand as he spoke, and they walked towards the canteen. Hey! Hu Yuhao felt a little strange when he witnessed how intimate Zhongli Wu was with Tang Yue. Can it be that Zhongli Wu is pining after teacher Xiao Yue? But he's already 180 years old. Hu Yuhao watched Zhongli Wu and Tang Yue walk towards the canteen, and he could only grit his teeth and follow at the back to prevent any suspicion. Zhongli Wu suddenly stopped walking at this moment. Hu Yuhao felt his heart skip a beat. Has he discovered something? Zhongli Wu turned around to look at Hu Yuhao and said, "Masquerade, you cannot come along. The blue silver holy lady doesn't have much of an appetite with you around. Go back, and have your meal later." Hu Yuhao was overjoyed when he heard those words, and he bowed respectfully toward Zhongli Wu like a great burden had been lifted from his chest before he turned to leave. "Who wants to eat with you guys?" Hu Yuhao swiftly returned to his tent, and exhaled deeply once he stepped in. That was so close. Teacher Xiao Yue seems to have discovered something. Fortunately, she seems a little dense and inarticulate, and she didn't bring it up to Zhongli Wu. For Hu Yuhao, the safest choice would be to run away as quickly as possible so that he could prevent any unforeseen dangers. But could he really leave? Everything that he had prepared and worked for would be wasted if he did. I can't leave, so I'm going to take a chance. I have to bet that teacher Xiao Yue hasn't recognized me, and she hasn't mentioned anything to Zhongli Wu. Hu Yuhao couldn't help but feel a little nervous as his thoughts stopped there. Everything that he had worked for would be wasted if he was discovered now, and he would also find himself trapped in dire danger. This video will end here.